Hello and welcome back to Greenland Farm. So this is the only UK map I'm playing at the moment. All the other maps I'm playing currently are all Irish ones. Now I have made one fairly significant, although probably reasonably small change to this map since any of you last saw me playing it, and that is that this farm here I had to manually fill the water troughs every morning and manually go and collect all the milk because I didn't have the automatic milk selling mod loaded, and I didn't have any water pumps loaded to fill water troughs with. And I've got to be honest, I got sick and tired of driving around all the fields twice with a tanker, once to collect milk and then once to drop off water before I could even start feeding the cows. So I have now made a slight change to the farm, and that I've now put in those two mods, so the milk all sells automatically each night at midnight, I think it sells from memory, and the water troughs will all automatically fill up now. But that's the only mod that the only change I've made to the farm really since any of you last saw it. The reason these doors are closed at the moment, and I normally leave them open, but during the winter months I close them to keep some heat in the barn here. And, I think I've gone through this the wrong way. Yes, I have. I'll need to pull out this other side then and come back in the other direction for it to work. Yeah, it's okay, I can do that, no problems. Now, after my last video, I had a few people asking questions. Some in the video itself, in the chat of the video, and some verbally asking me things. So the first question I got asked was from AK, and he asked me to explain why I like tight yards. And I think the reason he was asking me that was mostly because in one of my other farms in Ballincraig, I've tightened the yard right up, and it's a very, very tight yard now. And I said, when I showed people around that video, that I'd done that deliberately because I like nice tight yards. Well, and so I told him that I would give him the answer in this video. So we've got to go back to FS13 first of all. So when I played FS13 and FS15, I only had the PS3, I didn't have a PC. So I only had the mods that were available on PlayStation, which were very, very few, and absolutely no map mods whatsoever. It wasn't until much later versions, probably about FS22, that you could get maps and things on the consoles. So when I played FS13 and FS15 on the PS2, there were a few mods you could get, but none of them were maps, and I stuck with the standard maps. Now at that time, back when I was playing FS13, that's when I started watching farming videos on YouTube as well. And there weren't very many people making farming videos in those days. And in fact, I think one of the few that was doing farming videos was Daggerwin, and that was probably fairly near the beginning of his video making career. So at that time I was watching his videos, and I must admit I don't really watch his videos anymore, and I'm not knocking him in the slightest. Got no problem with what he does, but because he puts out a video every single day, they tend to become very, very repetitive, and so I just got bored with his videos and stopped watching them. But I still say more power to him and things. I'm certainly not knocking what he does or anything like that, absolutely not. Okay, and I just need to open a door here so I can is it that one I want to open? I think it's that one, it might be the next one, we'll find out soon enough anyway. So I'm not knocking him in the slightest, but I started following his videos, and he started playing on these no access to, because I was only playing on PlayStation. But I certainly like the look of his maps. So there you go, what's the other door I think I need to open? Never mind, it's done now. I absolutely loved those UK maps, but of course I was stuck with just the base maps that came out for the game. So what I started doing is, in order to make hedges around my fields to make them look more like British maps, I got a very, very narrow plough that was only like, I think, 1.2 2 metres or 1.5 metres wide. It was certainly a very narrow plough anyway, and I ploughed up single strips around all of my fields, and then I tried different crops first, and I think corn was the one I settled on. And the reason why is after the corn, after it wilted, it was still reasonably high, whereas most of the other crops, when they wilt, if you don't harvest them in time, they actually become very, very low. So then what I did is I planted single rows of corn around all my fields, and I treat those as hedges, and I left gates into the fields, and because I really, really envied, I suppose, these British maps that people who played on PC could play on and I couldn't. So I tried to turn my maps into British maps by making these hedgerows around all the fields out of single rows of corn. And then when FS15 came out, and from memory that was the first one that had forestry. In fact, I'm certain that was the first one that had forestry. So then I went one step further. I still planted my single rows of corn around the edges of all my fields to act as hedges, but then on either side of a gateway, instead of just having a gap in the corn, I'd actually plant a tree on either side of my gateway, and then I'd chop them off at the height of the corn, so they get the fence posts, the tree trunk there kind of resembled a fence post at the edge of the gate. And that way I not only had my hedges with gates, but I actually had solid gate posts that you couldn't drive through, albeit they were tree trunks that were just cut off very high up. And so I had these fields and things, I had to, these gates I had to drive through with my big equipment, deliberately lining it up perfectly to get them in. And I just really, really enjoyed that. And as a result of doing that, I'm going to start moving all this stuff across, because I sold the water tanker that was in the next bay across. This one can go across one now, and all the others will as well as I use them. So yeah, because of that, I actually got to really, really like having narrow gateways, narrow lanes, hard to get into paddocks, and tight yards. And it stuck with me ever since. I love to have a nice tight yard. I don't like it to be so tight that I just find it infuriating, because I'm always crashing into things, but reasonably tight. And see, another thing is, because I love small tractors, and it's not actually because I love small tractors per se, but all my favourite tractors happen to be tractors that are in the small category. So I'm absolutely useless at driving the articulated tractors. So I like a tractor that's just got, this normal steering like this, okay? But there's none of the tractors in the medium class that really, really appeal to me. All the tractors I love the most all just happen to be in the small class. So like there's the Fiat Agris like this, the one that I'm driving right now. There's the old Ford 10 series, the Ford 40 series, old David Browns and old Internationals, and old Massey Fergusons. And all of those tractors are all in the small tractor category. So it's not that I particularly like small tractors for any particular reason, it's just that all my favourite tractors happen to be small tractors. And then, because I've got a lot of small tractors, it means I have a lot of small equipment, because obviously the small tractors can't haul the big equipment, and so making tight yards and tight gateways just makes it even more fun when you're running around in small tractors with very small bits of equipment, which is what I'm doing. Yeah. Although having said that, the one thing I do like about American maps, and I don't really play American maps very much, the one thing I do really, really love is I love the idea of, I've done a couple where I had like 2 or 3 combine harvesters, all, I'm just trying to remember how I make TMR on this map, because each map has its own recipe for it. I might have to go and have a little look at the trailer there. So, where are we? Oh yes, no, I don't need. Yep. Okay, that's cool. I know how to make a TMR now for this map. So where was I? Oh yes. So the one thing I do really like about American maps, I like to have two or three harvesters where I drive the lead one and I use the follow me mod for the others. So I'm harvesting like with three harvesters in a big field all at once, and then having the what are they called? The grain cart things that you race around emptying the harvesters with when they get filled, and then having like a big articulated truck with two or three trailers put on the back. And I always, now I don't know how realistic this is or isn't, but I would imagine that a big articulated truck with two or three, big articulated trailers on the back is going to weigh an awful lot, especially as those trailers full with grain. And if you tried to drive them into a paddock that's just been freshly harvested, I would imagine that they would get very, very stuck indeed. So in those instances, I park these big articulated trucks on the very edge of the field where it's still hard compacted dirt and it hasn't just been harvested or anything. And as I fill up the grain carts, I go and empty them into these big articulated trucks. And there's the one thing I do really, really love about American farms. I love to be able to run multiple combine harvesters all at once and have the big articulated trucks with the grain carts. So you empty the harvesters into a grain cart and then you... Oh, that wasn't very well done, was it? Then you take the grain cart over to the truck to empty it from there. But yeah, on the whole, I much, much prefer these smaller, tighter yards and things. In fact, this yard here that we're in on this map is actually quite open and wide in places compared to what I normally do. But this one's still a yard I quite like, and I do have fractionally bigger equipment on this farm because I do have a combine harvester, and that Fiat tractor that's on the front of the feed wagon there. That wasn't well planned. That one's 180 horse because I need that when I'm doing crop fields, and I do have a few crop fields on this map. Not many, but I have a few, so I need a bigger tractor like that one. And as I said, that one's 180 horse. So this yard does need to be a wee bit tighter, a wee bit more open than what I often have, simply because I do have a slightly bigger tractor and slightly bigger equipment than what I often have on this farm. Yeah, and then the other thing I got asked about, I haven't run out of time yet. I got asked about the games that I mentioned in my last video that we used to go and play as a youth group. So we did Commie Hunts, we did Sofa Steals, we did Regressive Dinners, and I had a couple of people ask me, Jason and AK had no idea what those things were, so I'm going to try and briefly explain the rules of each of those games. Now, a commie hunt, and I'm sure you couldn't do a commie hunt nowadays, probably not. There's, I hate to say it, there's probably too much evil in the world and people would jump to the wrong conclusions. And even back in, so we're talking about 1982, 83, that I was attending a youth group where we did these sorts of things, so quite a few years ago now. And even back then, if the local youth group was going to do a commie hunt, you had to contact the police station and tell them you were having one, because you'd always have one or two people ring the police to say, hey, I just saw a car pull up, so a bunch of people jump out of this car, throw a sack over a person's head, throw them in the boot of the car and drive off again. So I think I've witnessed a kidnapping or something, and as long as you'd rang the police in advance or gone and see them and told them that the youth group was planning on doing this, they were fine with it, because then they could just say to these people, oh no, it's not a kidnapping, it's just a thing that the local youth group's doing tonight. And then they were fine with it. So what you'd have is, you'd have basically split into two teams. You'd have Christians who were on foot and communists who were in cars, and they'd often have like 3 or 4 people to a car. What would happen is the Christians would be given a location that they had to go to, and when they get to that location, they'll be given the next location, and when they get to that one, they'll be given the next location, and so on and so forth. So they only even know the next address that they have to make their way to on foot. The communists who are in cars are given a list of all of the locations that the Christians are going to be going to and the order they're going to them in, so they know approximately, oh look, these people have been on foot for 10 minutes, they're probably still on their way to the first location, and things like that. And the idea of it was that and yeah, I don't know you can necessarily do this nowadays really, but we used to jump people's fences and run through yards and things like that. You didn't necessarily stick to roads because you'd be too easily caught if you did. And so the idea was that the Christians were trying to make it to the last destination point, and there's normally about 6 or 8 destinations they're going to in total. Okay, so the Christians have to try and make it to the last destination point, and the communists have to try and catch as many of them as they can. And each time they catch, so you have like 3 or 4 carloads of communists, and every time they catch some Christians, they have to take them back to like the home base before they can go out again looking for more. So it was a lot of fun. Probably not very PC nowadays and things to talk about Christians and communists like that, but it was a game that we did as a youth group, and it was a lot of fun. Okay, now Sofa Steel was kind of similar to a Commie Hunt, actually, in that you had people in cars that you almost always have like 4 to a car when it was a Sofa Steel, and I do wish these AI cars would get out of my way because I'm going to damage someone, I'm sure I am. Alright, I got it in okay. So you'd have the group of people in cars, 4 to a car. You'd have the other people who were in groups of about 10 to 12, and they'd have a wooden bench, or so. I suppose that when the game was originally designed, you'd have an old sofa or something, but certainly our youth group used those wooden benches. So the group of 10 to 12 people that were trying to get away are going to whatever location they're trying to get to at the time, carrying this wooden bench with them. And if one of the cars full of the other team come along, they're only allowed to take you if you're touching the ground. So what you would do is, as soon as you saw one of these cars full of people that were after you, that didn't take very much. Didn't even use that trailer, is that actually full now? Because it doesn't. I expect that to take way more than it has. No, it hasn't. It's not filled up. I don't know why it stopped emptying, but that's okay. We can back in and give it some more. If you saw one of these cars full of people that were chasing you come up, I don't know what's happening there. Calf barn. Let's go and have a look here. So when you saw one of these group of people come up, you drop the sofa, the wooden bench, wherever you were at the time. You just drop it, and everyone would jump on it. And of course, you can't have. Yeah, that is full now. Okay, you can't fit 10 or 12 people all sitting on one of those wooden benches. So you'd have some people standing on it, and some other people kind of helping them hold on and things, so that you could. Actually, go this way too. So you could all be not touching the ground, and these people might stalk around for a minute or two to see if a couple of you would fall off the sofa, because with that many people on it was pretty precarious, trying to for everyone to hold on. And then they go off and look for another team, and it was quite funny because I remember once, for example, we were just crossing a road at a roundabout sort of thing when one of these cars full of people that were after us came along. So we dropped this wooden bench in the middle of the road and all jumped on it, and other cars going past must have really wondered what on earth we were doing. So that was a Sofa Steel. And then a regressive dinner, well, the easiest way to explain what a regressive dinner is to start by telling you what a progressive dinner is. So a progressive dinner is where you're given 4 addresses that you have to make your way to, and a lot of these games were things that involved running around the streets and things like that, because there's a lot of teenage boys and girls. You can try to, get them to burn off energy and the likes. So with a progressive dinner, you go to the first house, the first address you're given, and there you would be given a starter, so maybe some soup and bread or something. Then you'd make your way to the next house, and there might be challenges you need to complete on the way between the houses or something like that. At the next house, you'd be given a main. Then you'd move on to the next house, and perhaps completing some challenges and things on the way, and you'd have a dessert. And then you'd go to the 4th house, and you'd get after dinner mints. And a regressive dinner is the exact opposite of that. So you go to the first house and you get after dinner meals. You go to the next house and you have your dessert, and so on and so forth. So you can see how that works. So we did regressive dinners sometimes. We played flags down at the beach, and that's when you have two teams, and each team has a flag they're trying to protect, and you've got a piece of wool around your wrist, and that wool is your life. So if anyone from the other team manages to kill you by snapping your life, your piece of wool that's on your wrist, then you have to go back to your own base to get another life before you can continue in the game. And you're trying to steal the other team's flag and bring it back to your home base. So that was another thing that we did. And then another game that we played, and I really enjoyed this one because this was quite a challenge, this one. You were stuck in teams of 4 or 5 people, and each team was given $2 as a team. Okay? And you were given like maybe an hour and a half, and in that time you had to go and purchase as many different items as you could with $2. Now there were rules. One of the rules was you weren't allowed 2 of the same item, so you couldn't just go and buy 200 1-cent lollies, because you could buy a lolly and then that'd be one item as a lolly, but you couldn't get a lolly as another item because you only had one of each item. Another rule was you weren't allowed to count anything that you got for free. So if you found something on the side of the road, it wouldn't count, or if, like, let's say a shop gave you a paper bag to put something in, because in those days you didn't have to buy bags like you do nowadays, you couldn't count that because you got it for free. So in order to prove that you'd paid for every item you got, you had to ask for a receipt. And of course it's quite funny going to a shop and maybe buying a 1-cent lolly at a dairy and asking for a receipt for your 1-cent lolly, but you had to, because if you didn't have the receipt you wouldn't get points for that item. And $2 doesn't sound like a lot of money, but trust me, you very quickly run out of 1 cent, 2 cent and 5 cent things to buy. So you start buying things that are 10 cents and things. And okay, admittedly again, this was in the very early 80s, so things were cheaper than they are now, but even so it was very hard to find lots of different items you could buy. But that was another fun game that we played. So yeah, we certainly had a lot of fun in our youth groups playing these silly little games like that were really good at burning off energy and things, and a lot of fun to play as big groups. But yeah, I had people ask what these games were, so I thought I'd explain them, and hopefully I've explained them well enough that you now understand how you play those different games. So let's go and finish feeding that paddock of cows, and then that one that I started, which is I think that's my heifer paddock there from memory. Yes, it is. It's the only downside of playing multiple different maps simultaneously is it's easy enough to remember what you're up to on each map, because I try and save the game, each game at the beginning of the next day. So always my first job when I load the map is to go and feed all my cows, because that's the first job of the day, each day, and then I can sort of look at the map. Okay, what was I doing next? Was I growing crops? Was I mowing grass? What was I doing? And you can work out from then what your next job needs to be. But always, as long as you save at the end of a day, at the beginning of I normally sleep through the night and then hit save, then you know that the first job you've got is to feed cattle, and then you can work out from there what you need to do. So I've got loads and loads of paddocks of cattle to feed on this farm, but the video is beginning to get a bit long, so I'm not going to go and feed all of them while you're watching, but I will finish feeding the rest of them offline. And of course this map, all my cattle are visible, so I didn't have to use placeable cows anywhere. It's only that Bell and Craig one where all the cows were invisible, so I end up having to put in the placeable cows into the paddocks as well, just so you can see which my cow paddocks were. But there you go, we'll call it a day now. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.